Gregory Nava was born to a Hispanic Basque mother and Chicano father. But why is he important? He directed some of the films Mexican Americans heavily identify with, films that hold truth to our family experience, our humor, and a way of cultural expression as understood by the mainstream public, or aka the whites. Gregory Nava's Hispanic and more so Mexican identity is something he heavily identifies with and is incorporated into his work. But my biggest thing is, why does it always feel like the movies about Mexicans are written by someone who didn't have those experiences but instead witnessed them from afar?
And my brother and I were very, very close growing up. And we shared so much. We both became artists. There's my mom.
And this is coming from a no sabo or whatever. But I feel that's why I can identify what I'm speaking about. Gregory Nava understanding of Mexican culture is that of centered around the immigration struggles and often depicts indigenous people of Mexican descent like in films El Norte, which in fact El Norte helped him break through to a mainstream audience in a time where Mexican characters often had a one track narrative or were never main characters, aka Mexicans that were more in proximity to indigeneity in Hollywood movies were often the result of white directors' ideologies around Mexican indigenous people. And again, I think it's time for us to have this combo about indigeneity in the Mexican community, but since I don't think most of the folk will stay here for that, I'll tie this into a media analyst essay. Hara Gregory Naval discovered his Oling, but before then, he was what I understood, managing the dualities of his American and Mexican culture. Alongside his appreciation for the classic 1930s Errol Flynn films like Robin Hood and Captain Bloody, he would also be exposed to films like Maria Calendera or The Fugitive, co-produced or directed by Emilio Fernandez. Now, Emilio Fernandez is a popular Mexican director who at the time worked with actors like Maria Felix and director John Ford. And some of this is some 1940s tea, I guess. But my point being is Emilio Fernandez is a stinkball who consistently positioned indigenous people in his films as either in opposition to correct or kind of okay and sexy, maybe. Which maybe I can give Gregory the benefit of the doubt because this is a 5 hour director Oscar cut I hyperfixated on to make the majority of this script. But I understand only so much can really be said. It's just, again, in retrospect, his experience with college in Berkeley in 1965 would have me hopeful for the response along the lines of regarding his favorite directors. And from what I took from those films was nationalism and a pride in Mexican culture, but now can acknowledge also the undertones to those films and how they could maybe give me implicit bias towards the indigenous Mexican counterpart. 14. You're being hella extra, you'd say. Am I? And I'll question back because, again, the whole thesis to this essay surrounds the fact that the films that are consumed in majority regarding indigenous Mexicans often have a certain undertone that feels documentary-like or even just downright disrespectful in some aspects. And I know Gregory would hate to hear me say that considering he said he lugged up this huge 35mm camera to Chiapas to film his Indie John, so it would come across more authentic. But again, he's white and tried to convince me in the first half that he grew up in a modest or poor lifestyle because his family lived in a 3-bedroom home that was behind another in San Diego, alongside his father owning other apartments and holding down a military salary after World War One. You're trying to tell me the leverages are the same as a poor indigenous person as him? It's just not. It's not. But we're not picking him apart like that. I just wanted to point that fact out. the part of the interview that oh my god, I just hold on. Anyway, yeah, Gregory put JLo in both border towns, Salina and Mi Familia, which something Emilio Fernandez did was do that with Maria Felix. But whatever, I'm not here to point out the power imbalances of a hot, newly funded director and a girl trying to make her dreams come true. That's, again, another essay. But in Mi Familia, you see a span of 3 generations and the crippling effects of living in poverty as a Mexican. But then again, Gregory in this interview was trying to convince you that that is the case with his own experience, but I'm not sure that is affirmed from me personally when he says things like his family from Mexico was wealthy, but his family from the States was poor. Like, it comes to the basic reality of looking at Gregory's tapes and noticing that even as somebody who grew up higher income, aka how I grew up, because of how my parents wanted to sustain myself within a white society, there was certain, financial barriers, but within everyone's own social economic state and time in history is that different. So at the time, I'm sure Gregory felt that, having weekly movie outings and going to Disneyland once a year was something a poor family could afford themselves based off of his experiences. But I want to just, broaden our perspective in the case of the people that he is representing most likely don't go to Disneyland once a year. But why does that matter? Well, there are a couple components to that provide context to his movies and why Mexican Americans are positioned in that way. AKA, through his view as a director, there's ways that he executes the Mexican American lifestyle that I feel holds truth to the sentiments that we parade around our culture. And that's all fine and dandy, but in the sense of that, it really doesn't speak true to what happens within indigeneity and Mexican culture and this whole aspect of migration, i.e., really getting down. Does Gregory really get down to the nitty gritty of the process, or did the Hollywood director or the people, Hollywood funds who could greenlit these movies, kind of invest in the fact that it was a romanticization of this process within our culture? Now, I'm down to discuss this take as well. Nothing I ever say doesn't come without the awareness of the bias that it comes with, and that's kind of why I make these videos to also put me in the opportunity to learn from y'all. But Northern was straight trauma corn, and there's a part of me that is not satisfied with how we are presented throughout historical, biographical type of movies that are supposed to, again, create the compassion in white Americans to care about indigenous people. It's cheesy, bro. Like, it's tiresome. Maybe because I'm also born 3-4 generations removed when the acknowledgement was the bare minimum. I'm just kind of like, all right, the representation is clearly just not where the conversation needs to end. But y'all was satisfied with that.
We walked into Chase, right?
Like, I had to get money, and it was just the closest one you get me.
Bro, he asked for a small amount, bro. For that, they made him get, maybe it's protocol, right?
Yeah,
they made him check his ID twice, the card twice. They made him pull out like a little withdrawal thing. He made a sign there. It was a small amount, right? Whatever. He's like, damn, here it goes again. Cool. We're about to walk out.
By the way, bro, I wasn't there, but this happened. The same happened to Felipe when I went to the bank with him. Like, the same.
I'm not even trying to be funny, but he always gets profiled.
If I have my hand like this,
bro, literally, bro, it sucks to say, right? But it's just that's. Anyways, sucks to say. But we're walking out, bro, and the guy that's like what the hostess.
mind you, bro. Okay, let me explain. You tell her how much you want. I'm like, yeah, can I have this amount? Okay, this amount seems right on the pin pad. Yeah, can you put your pin in? Boom, 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 boom.
more.
Bro
Okay.
got stuff for $300, kid. For $300, kid.
Nah, that's on bro. That,
Bro, like, you know,
Burberry
dump
Hill.
that in.
Oh my! $300 a lot of money.
It wasn't
guys.
Burberry
Oh,
Hill
it
though,
is.
right?
Gang, it is, but come on.
But I pull my card in.
Come on.
Oh, it says please wait. It's waiting for like 10 minutes, bro. No
Nah,
bullshit.
But we're there for a minute.
Nah, like,
Man, to get it going.
Bro.
So I'm right there, and I'm dead ass. I'm hot, bro. Because bro, $300, like, come
You'll
on,
be
bro.
hot, bro. Yeah,
Yeah.
no doubt.
The whole fucking protocol. I shit you not. They did not get the branch manager.
bro, it's like, can you give me a minute? I'm gonna go to the branch manager.
They got the branch manager.
Oh, bro.
Bro, yeah.
Bro.
So we're there, whatever. We're walking out. The security is right next to the host, right?
No. Bro, they bring security. They're like, you put your card in again?
Nah,
Put my card in again. Put my pin in again. It's like, this is your name, right? Yeah. Can I see your ID? Okay. I put my pin in, pull it out, boom. Can I see your debit card? They look at the debit card, they look at the ID. They're like, okay, can you sign this? They make like a actual statement, like you get the little.
It was bad, bro. So we're walking out, bro, and the guy that's there, the host, right? He's like, "Yo, Felipito, Brandon, Chicos Toxicos. Yo, bro, can I please get a picture, bro? It's quiet as fuck in there." We're like, "Yeah, bro, come through." Boom, we get the flick with them, and yo, pleasure to meet you. You guys are funny as this and this. Where's Diegs? Diegs at home washing the dishes. Whatever. We step out, right? We step out, and then there was a red light. In the bus driver driving the metro, bro, stops, and then he's like, "Yo, Felipito, this and this, bro, Chicos Toxicos, bro." We go back, we dab them up, boom. We started walking again, right? And then the lady that's holding the sign,
Yeah, there's a lady holding the sign. Shout out to all my construction workers. I always say it. Somebody with a pickup truck.
White
I think
pickup.
they're doing
see, that's
landscaping. They're doing landscaping. Felipito, that's my up.
Bro, it
gang.
was like a drive-by dab.
Nah,
like that.
it's
Boom.
lit.
1
That's
second
lit, dog.
goes, and then she's like, "Oh, like yeah, you guys are."
The nuanced relationship between colorism and Mexican American culture is never really addressed in these movies. And I do want us to understand that it is almost assumed that if you are darker skinned or closer to indigeneity, that you will run into a lifestyle that either has a poverty aspect, a criminal aspect, a drug aspect, or you just aren't able to sustain your lifestyle without help of a white person or white supremacy. And this is exactly how our movies are framed as Mexican Americans and are put in front of us for us to relish in those same sentiments. Because you know why? Do you know why? We are an abused people. We have an abusive relationship with the ideology that we should only try harder for us to be able to succeed. Because I have a question for y'all though. How do you facilitate your nationalism as a Mexican American? What do you find to be prideful about surrounding your ethnicity and your culture and where you're from? What do you think that says about you? What do you assume your implicit biases are, and what do you think has been associated with those experiences that you've had, whether that be religion, food, relationship, identity, gender, sexuality, all of those things, because we're all our own experience. And the reason I talk so much about Gregory's childhood and how he experienced Mexican culture is because I want us to understand that the nationalism that we identify with is curated with how we get to experience Mexican identity. And that is rooted, as far as how we get to experience that choice, in colorism, featureism, overall, standards within white supremacy, how you express yourself, how you speak, what languages you speak. Because in my opinion, I think even within Mexican culture, these are barrier to entries. But in my past videos, I had explained how there's almost a commodification of indigeneity when you have the access of both. And I'm talking about lighter skinned Latinos that obviously, facilitate blood wise percentage of indigeneity, and I am a part of this group, but does not have cultural connection to that. In the ways as Mexicans, we are able to compartmentalize what happens to indigenous people as a byproduct of the immigration process and subsequently accept our fate as cogs within a capitalistic machine, meaning since the inception of our race, we have always been thought of as tools of labor for whiter people. For white people, it just shows that we also like to take any bone we can get. Oh God, you're gonna hate me for saying that. I know y'all are gonna hate me for saying that, and I know y'all are also gonna hate me for saying that. You being in America and not being able to acknowledge your privileges from your lack of proximity to the immigration process, but be able to commodify the indigenous aspect of your identity. White supremacy revels in, enjoys, and it's horrible. And it is the whole reason why indigenous groups are telling y'all that you are not allowed to be a part of their cultural acknowledgments or just their cultural spaces, because you have outworn your welcome. You are doing too much. You are literally not safe company. Okay? So in the sense of not all skin folk or kinfolk, have proven to us over and over again with the choices that you make that you'll align to white supremacy to benefits from its privileges. And there's an aspect of, I think Paulo Ramos speaks on it, in that a lot of folk who tend to immigrate to America, or there's one aspect of this conversation where folk who immigrate to America do have quote unquote conservative ideologies that align with what I'm explaining towards how you guys conceptualize your indigeneity, where you're like, I'm a perfected race now that I have white in me, la raza cósmica. But like, it's giving that. It's giving that, first of all. And I know y'all gonna hate me for saying that too. Oh my God, I'm getting nervous. But as somebody who grew up with that shit being pumped into their brain, I gotta be real with you.
How broad is this? Because when I think about like conservative Latinos, Republican Latinos, like, oh, like just Florida or Texas, but we're kind of seeing it here, right? I don't know if you know.
Well, look, again, coming from Miami, the idea was always that Miami was the exception. Not that what Donald Trump did in Miami-Dade County, for instance, which was really close those margins, and compared to what Hillary Clinton got, I think Clinton had over 20%, and then he sort of closed it to just 6% for the Democrats in 2020. And so I think that was always, the Democrats would always say, look, that's an exception. This isn't happening anywhere else. But I think if we're not alarmed by the idea that he can even poll more than 35%, like I think that's problematic. Republicans typically have gotten at least 30% of the vote, no? But I think I treat Trumpism different. I also think there's other studies, like Telemundo just had a poll 2 weeks ago, and they found when you ask Latinos who's the better leader, who has the better character across party lines, they will overwhelmingly choose her. Overwhelmingly, the margins are huge. And then when you start asking them in which party best represents your values, I think for the first time in years that margin has really started to shrink. And so I think there is something deeper happening, but I also think that the other side of the story, which is not to your point, I don't touch on that, but I think the flip side of it is you're absolutely right. From SB 1070, from California's history, that also created this incredible mobilize Latino community that I believe is at the heart of sort of the Democratic Party's chances of winning. And I think what we're also seeing is maybe not more younger Latinos that are choosing Republicans or to be independent, but I think they're demanding more from the party, and that's the difference. No? They're demanding more from the Democratic Party. They want them to be more challenged. They expect them to follow through on certain promises, particularly in a state where there's so much at risk.
Or a child of immigrants like myself, how do they land in a position where they do support, let's say, a Donald Trump, or just policies of mass deportations or asylum restrictions? How do they get to that point?
I mean, I think there's many things happening at once, right? I think when you have a Republican platform that for the past 4 years has been telling Americans every single day that there's an invasion, that migrants and asylum seekers are here to threaten you, that you feel unsafe. I mean, I live in New York City. The fear is so palpable even there. Now, even though we're miles and miles away from the southern border, like that rhetoric is really, really sort of getting into people's psyche. I mean, even the vice presidential debate compared this time to 4 years ago. 4 years ago, they mentioned immigration 0 times. The word immigrant 0 times, the border 1 time. And here we are in a completely different environment where you have the Trump campaign that is really trying, I believe, to reenact that 2016 build the wall moment because it worked. And so every day they're doing this. And so I think there's an element of like that mis and disinformation works. B, just because we are descendants of immigrants and Latinos, none of that makes us immune to believing and taking in those sentiments. Again, we come from histories and countries where racial hierarchies and social hierarchies have been deeply ingrained in us. No? So this idea of who gets up the ladder first is very real. And then the second or third element is that we've really changed as a community. You know? Who we are now is so different from who we were 30 years ago. We are more assimilated, we're more American, we're younger, we speak English. And so there's something real about, and I think that's kind of the uncomfortable question, right? I think there's a sector of Latinos that see themselves simply more reflected in Trump's image of America, right? We may perceive ourselves as this, but there's a group of people that don't see themselves reflected in sort of this, again, going back to this idea of this like allegiance to us, to the collective us. And there's also some truth to that because, again, America, who criminalizes immigrants every day, who criminalizes brown people, even makes a lot of American Latinos believe that they are these perpetual foreigners, that they don't belong here. And so when you add all these elements together, it turns people into wanting to be part of the in-group, not the out-group.
Movies like Selena have encompassed sentiments surrounding the difficulty faced culturally as a Mexican individual because of how Gregory is able to facilitate the aspects of this lifestyle as a Mexican American on screen. Movies like Blood In and Blood Out show the carnalismo in generations of the 70s and 90s that still can be found in Chicano culture to this day. Mi Familia shows the reality of the 1920 mass deportations as a result of the Great Depression, and of course this hugely affects people's lives and influences. El Norte has significant and raw insight into the featureism, colorism, and racism that indigenous individuals face when making their journey through the U.S. immigration process. And Gregory is most proud of the social impact assumed from the asylum-seeking immigrants that previously didn't have as much luck within this process, according to Gregory. These movies have this important place, clearly, still, since they're being referenced by young adults my age. It's just gotta be said that sometimes I feel like the depiction of these things just encompassed all I have tried to explain through trying to have y'all get to know Greg. I think white people and Mexicans like to see the duality of success again within the system because, again, we get 4 remixes on the screen. Some being, this is the Hollywood depiction, and we're talking movies, not TV shows. But if you have suggestions for them, to go through the comments would be nice and let us know. And if you're here, subscribe and check out the Patreon for my art and access to notes, links, and resources I use for the video. Anyway, so it could be a combination of Gregory romanticizing the story through a neoliberal Chicano movimiento lens, and also maybe just I'm overdoing it, right? If we just go to school or just invest ourselves in the roles performed in our system of supremacy, it's a win because it's better than nothing. It's just, alright, here's what I had to say back to that. Just look at the representation options in movies: criminal, for white laughter, or like a cop, some type of Aztec god, or Mayan mixed mash, even though there are 68 different indigenous groups within just Mexico. Poor and hardworking. If you're lucky, it's a biography, or you're like a musician or something. All the houses are smaller and less paid to be built upon. The area was previously marshland and owned to the Loni native people, but currently there was a foot of sand on top of that and concrete. A super small town and even smaller community. And me. All the Latino and Black presence was allotted for through the neighborly but obvious question from the kids and adults alike from the area: do you live here? As if the past 8 years of walking home to a place that was almost directly across from the school wasn't telling enough. But having several neighbors who even worked or went to the frequent establishments I went to didn't have the same feeling about this flea infested hell. See, when you put sand on top of marsh, it attracts invasive insects, one of those being fleas. And everyone there was itching with the privilege of the area code. Everyone bitten got the same bug, and some of us bought in, my dad being one. Growing up, this place chewed up and spit out his spirit. In remembrance, all I can recall is him saying how it was impossible for him to finish. But finish what? Even being there from grade 1 to 12 could put you a step ahead of the game. And I was supposedly learning, but obviously now I was losing. I titled this, Who Are You When You Are Not Trying to Be White? Because I noticed how in my life I have been put in positions to learn how to thrive in the white supremacist system by family as a means of survival. And I wonder, maybe some of this was out of conscious habit, or maybe it was intentional conditioning. George Lopez's famous series, The George Lopez Show, was encouraged and greenlit by popular comedian and producer Sandra Bullock. In the article I read, she was in the mind frame to create a Latino series, noticing the gap in the market in television. I want to give y'all a time frame we're talking. From 1999, George Lopez was a talk radio host in the AM and a comedian in the PM.